Chapter 9. Nancy closed her eyes, waited a beat, then forced them open. The dark hall loomed ahead of her. She focused on the bottom of the staircase, held her breath, and waited again. All she saw were shadows, and all she heard was her own heartbeat. No one was there. Not now, anyway. Letting out her breath in a sigh of relief, Nancy leaned against the door and found herself falling backward as the door opened easily, depositing her on her rear on the stone steps outside. Of course, she thought, picking herself up. It's a double door. You just pushed the wrong side. Glad to be outdoors, Nancy took several deep gulps of the cool autumn air. Then she saw George's car make a slow turn around the side of the building. "Hey!" Nancy waved her hand and ran down the front steps. "Here I am!" The car slowed and Bess stuck her head out the window. "We were just about to give up and go home," she said. "George has been driving around this parking lot forever, but I kept telling her you probably got a ride with Daryl." "I wish I had been with Daryl," Nancy said as she climbed into the back seat. "He's a lot more fun, and a lot safer, too." "Why? What happened?" George wanted to know. As they drove away from Bedford High, Nancy filled them in on everything that had happened, from the details of Jake's murder to her own scary escape from the video lab. "And wait till you see the tape," she said, patting her duffel bag. "It'll never win an Oscar, but it's one of the most fascinating movies I've ever seen." When they got back to Nancy's River Heights home and settled down to watch, they soon discovered that the tape was even more fascinating than Nancy had predicted. And Walt Hogan wasn't the only person Jake had made into a star. Bess sighed as she watched Hunk tape his ribs. "How can he stand to play when he's in pain?" "It's his only chance for that scholarship," George said. "If he doesn't get that, he'll never make the pros." "Yeah, and he wasn't about to let anything stand in his way," Nancy commented. "Not the pain and not Jake." "Poor guy," Bess sighed again. "At least Jake Webb can't bother him anymore. Do you suppose Hunk is glad, deep down, that Jake's dead?" "He wouldn't be human if he weren't," Nancy said. "But I have a question for you. Do you suppose Walt Hogan had anything to do with getting rid of Jake?" Before either of her friends had a chance to answer that startling question, another face appeared on the television screen. The smooth, round face of Connie Watson. "Who's that?" Bess asked. "A girl from Bedford High," Nancy told her, and scooted to the edge of the couch, wondering what on earth shy Connie could possibly have done to get a part in Jake Webb's movie. She soon found out. The setting was a sidewalk sale in fashionably quaint downtown Bedford. All the shop owners had brought their wares out to the sidewalks on what looked like a sunny autumn day. Crowds of shoppers strolled by, eating ice cream cones and stopping to look at paintings, handmade pottery and furniture, and, Nancy noticed with a sense of dread, jewelry. Nancy knew what was coming the minute she saw the jewelry display. Sure enough, the camera panned the crowd and focused on Connie Watson, a large shopping bag in her hand. Nancy's heart sank as she watched what happened next. Connie picked up a bracelet, the one Nancy had seen her wearing, and admired it for a minute. Then she seemed to ask the shop owner the price and reluctantly put it back on the display table. "Now just watch," Nancy told her friends. "She's about to make the biggest mistake of her life." Hovering at the edge of the jewelry table, Connie waited until the owner was busy with about 6 customers at once. Then a close-up, courtesy of Jake the cameraman, showed her hook a finger under the bracelet and slide it into her conveniently waiting shopping bag. The camera pulled back then, and Connie melted into the crowds that filled the sidewalk. But Jake wasn't through with Connie. His next shot caught her going up the front steps of the high school, the early morning sun glinting on her new gold bracelet. So far, we've seen somebody covering up an injury and somebody shoplifting, George said. I wonder what's next. I'm not sure I want to know, Bess shuddered. This whole thing gives me the creeps. Oh no! Nancy pointed to the television screen and shook her head in amazement. It's Hal Morgan. I should have guessed. The next installment of Jake's horror show followed Hal, nervous nail chewer and future Harvard scholar, straight to the door of the office of Bedford High's principal. Like Walt Hogan, Hal probably thought he was alone because he glanced furtively around before entering the office. The camera didn't follow him inside. It held steady on the closed door. 5 seconds passed, and then the door opened. Out came Hal, who stood still, obviously trying to work something out in his mind. You can almost hear the wheels turning, George remarked. He's empty-handed. I wonder what he's after. Answers, Nancy said. Bess looked confused. Huh? Just keep watching, Nancy told her. You'll see what I mean. Having worked out the problem, Hal walked quickly to another door. Without bothering to look behind him, he opened it and went inside. The camera stayed on the sign on the door, which read, Counselor's Offices. When Hal came out this time, he wasn't empty-handed. He didn't look worried or confused anymore either. The camera gave Nancy and her 2 friends a brief glimpse of Hal's triumphant smile, but it lingered longest on what he held in his hands. Answer books for the scholastic aptitude tests. How could Jake tape that without Hal seeing him? George asked. He really knew his video stuff, Nancy said. He probably set that one up by remote control. That would explain why the offices had been broken into earlier. He must have been rigging up the camera. She thought a minute. I wouldn't even be surprised if he gave Hal the idea for stealing those answers, just so he could tape the whole thing. After all, Jake did work in the principal's office. Wavering black bars and dancing snowflakes had appeared on the screen, and Nancy turned off the VCR and the television. I'm glad that's over, she commented. So am I. Bess stood up and stretched. I don't know why, but movies always make me hungry, even this one. Let's go see what's in the refrigerator. In the refrigerator, they found leftover takeout Chinese food. Sitting at the round oak kitchen table, the 3 friends discussed Jake's tape between bites of lo mein and shrimp fried rice. Obviously, Connie didn't buy that bracelet, Nancy said. She stole it. And after Hal lost so much ground trying to become class president, he knew the only way he'd get into Harvard was to cheat on the SAT so that he could get unusually high scores. Bess poured herself some more diet soda. And poor Hunk! It must be awful to feel so desperate. Why do you think Jake did it? George asked. Money? Maybe. Nancy crunched thoughtfully on an ice cube. But I think it was more of a power trip. He would find someone's weak spot and dig in. Jake liked knowing everybody's secrets. That's probably how he found out about me in time to tape us at the mall that day. He must have had his ear to Mr. Parton's door when Mr. Parton talked to my father. He knew my secret, too. He liked being king of the mountain. Yeah, well, somebody finally pushed him off, Bess said. And no wonder. He must have had things on half the kids in school. But he only has 3 people on tape, George pointed out. Nancy, do you really think one of them killed him? Nancy shrugged her shoulders in frustration. Later, after George and Bess had left, she took a long hot shower, trying to come up with an answer to George's question. Walt Hogan was strong enough to give Jake that final push, she thought, especially if he'd been angry. And Hal wasn't exactly a lightweight. If he'd been desperate enough, he might just have decided to challenge Jake. She couldn't rule out Connie either. Sweet, gossipy Connie Watson was as strong a candidate for murderer as the 2 guys. Anyone could have pushed him. Nancy turned around and let the warm, misty spray roll off her back. Jake Webb wasn't just a thief and a vandal, she thought. He was the Bedford High blackmailer. Getting power from kids who'd made mistakes must have given him a kick, a sick, sadistic kick. But somebody had finally kicked him back. The question was, who? Was it really one of the kids on the tape? Walt or Connie or Hal? Could one of those 3 Bedford High students have been so determined to get out from under Jake's thumb that he or she murdered him to keep a secret safe? End of chapter 9.